All right. Well, guys, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and get started. As you guys can see, we have two sections left, right, in this FORTINET NSE4 journey, two sections left of chapter one. So you guys been doing great, right? We're going to go ahead and jump in, right? We're still in the introduction and initial configuration section. But we're going to go ahead and jump in and talk about the different servers, right, that are built in within the Fortigate, okay? So some of the objectives that we need to go ahead and achieve going through this section is one, enable the DHCP service on a FortiGate, right? Two, enable the DNS service on the FortiGate, and also understand the configuration possibilities and some of their implications, okay? So, ooh, excuse me. Wow. Okay, so you guys see the screen, you see the screenshots, and we're going to go ahead and take a moment to go ahead and configure this, right? But let's talk about it, right? The thing about this is that on every interface, right, on the FortiGate, they give the option to go ahead and set up that interface to be the DHCP server, right? It's built in, right? You can go ahead and provision different features, like put different options, maybe have some wireless clients that you want to get specific, settings, right? You can go ahead and set that, right? You can also block specific MAC addresses from receiving an IP address, okay? All the similar things that you think you can do with a Windows server, right? Operating system, you can actually do with the FortiGate operating as the DHCP server, right? And so if you take a look at I know it's kind of blurry, right? So that's what we're going to hop into inside the lab. But if you look in the middle of the screenshot, right, it actually shows you that we can set IP address assignment rules, right, within that IP address assignment rule section, right? So let's go ahead and hop in, right? So I'm going to pull up my lab, right? And what we're going to do, right, because of course we have the different VLANs, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add just a, basic PC, nothing major, right? And we are going to add it to the switch, keep it in VLAN 1, right? And we are going to set up the port 2 as a DHCP server, okay? All right, and we'll see if that works, right? We'll go ahead and configure that, okay? So go ahead and plug that in, right? Okay, it's off of gigabit Ethernet 0/3. Go ahead and start it up. Excellent, right? So now let's go into the FortiGate, right? Let's go ahead and configure it as a DHCP server. All right, there we go. All right, we see the login screen. Let's go ahead and log in. Right, perfect. Okay, so if we want to go ahead and configure the FortiGate to operate as a DHCP server, we need to go ahead and do that on the interface level. Okay, so let's go to network, right? You see the different options that we have here, but we're only focused on interfaces, okay? And our local area network, right, is on port 2, okay? Right, that's connected to VLAN 1 on the switch. So let's go ahead and configure that as a DHCP server, right? So we have the subnet, right, at 10.10.1.0/24, right? Let's go ahead and configure it, right? So we have this toggle that says DHCP server, okay? Once I hit the toggle, right, all the options populate, right? And as you guys can see, right, it's automatically going to notice, hey, off this interface, we need to make a DHCP scope for this same subnet, right? Okay, so I like to go ahead and make it, for a certain amount of numbers. We're just going to do a short amount, right? We're going to make it the same, right? I'm going to go ahead and just do Google, right? Since we don't have a server in here, right? So you can set, of course, you enable the DHCP status, right? You can disable it or enable it, right? While the DHCP server is actually configured on the interface, right? So I can have this toggle put disable, and it'll stop listening, right, to DHCP packets that come through. right? Or frames, I'm sorry, it's at the layer 2 level that's coming through, okay? So let's go back and enable it, right? We go ahead and set our address range, right? The amount of addresses we want to go ahead and make available for our potential DHCP clients. We go ahead and set the network mask, right? So of course it's /24 on our interface, so we'll make that the same, okay? The default interface, of course, default gateway, I'm sorry, we can set it has, and it gives us a few options. We can make it the same as the interface IP, so basically this IP, right? Or we can specify, right? Maybe there's some DHCP relay happening on the switch, but in this instance, it's not. This PC is in the same broadcast domain, which is VLAN 1, as the FortiGate. So we're good, right? But
Hey,
yes, we can specify. Mm-hmm.
can you explain DHCP relay, or is that like too in depth for like this right here?
I can explain it. Here's the thing. It's an advanced topic, right? Within the CCNA.
Okay.
So I just want to stay on track and just talk about the DHCP server. If we have time at the end, if you want to remind me, we can go ahead and emulate DHCP relay, and I can show you what that looks like, okay?
Okay.
All right. So yes, you have the option for the default gateway, right? Also, for the DNS server, you can set it to the same as the system DNS, right? And let's go ahead and save the setting and let me show you what that looks like, right? So we pick the option, same as system DNS, right? We pick that there. What that would do is use this DNS, right? So Kristen or Mykevia can be, deploying a new FortiGate for a client. And if you hit that setting on the DHCP server that says use the same as a system, it is going to use this, okay? Right? This is Fortinet's FortiGuard servers, right? We talked about FortiGuard servers 2 nights ago, okay? So that's that, right? We can go ahead and also set it as the interface IP, right? We can go ahead and set that there, right? That is an option, right? Or we can just specify it, right? I went ahead and put Google's 8.8.8.8, right? We can also configure the lease time, right? But here's the interesting thing, right? We can go ahead and disable the lease time, right? What will that do, right? If we hover over it, right, we can read it verbatim. Disabling the lease time will result in clients having an unlimited lease duration, right? So what does that mean, right? So we have roughly 50 IPs to hand out, right? Mykevia works in a building of 100 people, right? 50 people, come on Monday, and a different set of 50 people come on Tuesday. But probably a couple people from Monday come in on Tuesday. They're not going to have that server, right? That's on the FortiGate. It's not going to have enough IPs to give out because it doesn't expire, right? It's unlimited. So it's going to stay tied to whoever client it was assigned to whenever it was going through that DORA process. Okay. So you can do what you want, right? Just like I told you guys, right? These devices, Fortinet, Cisco, etc., they give you the option to do absolutely whatever you want. Okay. Let's hit the plus sign. Let's see some advanced options, right? So, Mykevia just asked about DHCP relay. We can set up a DHCP relay, okay? Right? We can go ahead and set up the type, right? If it's just regular, like a regular DHCP server, or this is going to work as a DHCP server that's going through an IPsec tunnel, okay? And now IP address is there, right? We can go ahead and set the NTP server, right? And again, within Windows Server, typically this will be like an option that you would set, right? Option maybe 149, you would go ahead and set this, right? Fortinet made it easier, right, for us to go ahead and configure it without remembering option numbers. They went ahead and put it in words. NTP server, right? We can set the wireless controller, right? Typically that's an option you have to set on Windows Server. The FortiGate, user friendly, you say, hey, what is the IP address of the wireless controller? Boom, right? So you have that option. You can set the time zone, the bootstrap server, and last but not least, similar to Windows, you can go ahead and set, right, your own DHCP options, and it has plenty of options, some preset and some you can just specify manually, okay? All right, and of course it has that TLV, right? Type value, right? Type value format, right? Type length value format, okay? Last but not least, right? We're talking about the IP address assignment section, right? Again, you have the option to go ahead and assign, block, or reserve an IP address to a host, right? Let's say Christian, right? He's managing an organization. He wants to go ahead and say, right, these printers, right? Even though I want to set a static IP, let's go ahead and just tell the DHCP server to reserve this IP for this specific MAC address. He can go ahead and set it here, okay? He can assign that here. He can go ahead and block, right? He can go ahead and block an IP, a MAC address, right? He can go ahead and reserve, right? You have the option, right? So what is this, what does this mean? What does this big option mean, right? FortiGate uses the host MAC address to look up its IP address in the reservation table, right? So in a sense, this is the reservation table, okay? Multifunction, so to say, right? So a little bit of the cool features of the FortiGate, right? We're not going to play with advanced features for this lab, but we will come back to it, okay? Now let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so FortiGate has a DNS server, right? Same thing as the DHCP server, right? These built-in servers are going to do the job that an external server would, right? If the FortiGate, right, you want to go ahead and configure it to run as a DNS server, what is it going to do? It is going to resolve DNS lookups from the internal network, right? Just like the DHCP server function, it is enabled per interface, okay? Right? Fortinet says it is not appropriate for internet service because of the load. So therefore, that option should not be set to your WAN interface. Okay? All right. So Fortinet also says one DNS database can be shared by all FortiGate interfaces, right? You can also separate it via virtual domain, right? Or VDOM, right? We're going to talk about VDOMs in the future, right? Also, they do have different methods of DNS resolution, all right? You have your forward resolution, right? Relay request to the next server, right? So it may get the DNS request and you can set the method to forward and say, hey, send it over to maybe 10.10.20.0 to go ahead and resolve the request that I get on my interface, right? Maybe you want to go ahead and use the non-recursive resolution, right? Use the FortiGate DNS database only to try to resolve queries. Okay, you have that option as well. And last but not least, you also have the options of a recursive resolution, right? What does that mean? For the FortiGate to use the DNS database first, then say, hey, I can't resolve it. I need to go ahead and forward it to the next server, right, that we have configured. Okay, so you can go ahead and configure this not just in the GUI but in the CLI, right? Let's go ahead and jump in and try to take a look at that. Okay, that where is there we go. All right, so we're back. We are back on the GUI, right? And of course, where we would configure that is in the DNS section. Okay, right? We can go ahead and take a look at some of the information, right? We can go ahead and set all of our things here. We can specify what that primary DNS server is, right? We can go ahead and set the DNS protocol that's going to be used, right? I can use the default, which is DNS uses port 53, right? Or I can say, hey, I want to go ahead and use TLS. I can go ahead and do that too. Caveat of that, I need to go ahead and use a certificate, SSL certificate at that, right? Maybe I don't want to go ahead and use TLS. I want to use HTTP, right? Still use a certificate. So Fortinet gives you plenty of options, right? It's totally up to you what you want to do. right? Let's go ahead and take a look at this, right? So let's set everything back, okay? And let's go ahead and not change anything, right? We're good here. And I'm going to show you, right? We're going to go to feature visibility because you can actually have a section that's called DNS servers, right? So we're going to go ahead, go to feature visibility, and we are going to look for the feature that says DNS database, right? So we're going to look at additional features and we see DNS database. We're going to go ahead and enable that, right? And what does that do? It set up the FortiGate unit, has a DNS server for your network, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we go ahead and enable that, hit apply. And we're going to see the network section has an additional section called the DNS server, right? And so everything I was talking about previously, this is where we can go ahead and enable it. We wouldn't so much enable DNS on the actual interface. We can tell what DNS servers it's going to use based on where the DNS server will be if we go ahead and set it within those DHCP settings. But we can go ahead, right, and say, hey, same as interface IP, and this, if we specify that same interface, it can go ahead and operate as a DNS server, right? So we can go ahead and say, hey, I want to use port 2, right? And of course, the modes that I told you. We can use it as forwarding to system DNS, right? It gets those queries and go ahead and forward it to a separate DNS server, non-recursive, right? It replies to queries for items in the FortiGate DNS database and does not forward unresolved queries, right? So if it doesn't, it's not able to resolve it, it's just going to go ahead and just not forward and drop it, right? Recursive, first, it's going to go ahead and try to respond to the queries and resolve it. If it cannot resolve, then it's going to go ahead and send it to the next. It's going to go ahead and send it to the next DNS server, right? We can go ahead and enable that, right? And let's say I went ahead and chose recursive, right? I can go here and I can set up, right, the different zones, right? Of course, this is not a Microsoft or a DNS section. I will not go in depth, right? And for the exam, you're not going to have to know in depth. You just need to know how you can go ahead and enable the DNS option, okay? So let's go ahead and remove our configuration, right? Let's go on back. All right, let's click on our interface and let's go ahead and delete, right? Simple as pie, right? We can go ahead and leave that feature for the DNS servers. We can leave that enabled. It doesn't hurt nobody, okay? Let's keep going. Any questions so far about the DNS server function?
Yes.
Okay.
It is straightforward. However, so I guess my question is there any instances where the DNS server is just configured as the quad 8? Is that like in transparent mode mostly, or is it just regardless if it's in transparent mode or not?
And let me make sure I understand your question. Are you asking, are you able to enable the DNS server function if it's operating in transparent mode?
No,
Okay.
no, not that. But my question is more so like, when would you just use the quad 8? Is it when the firewall is in transparent mode? Or like, when do you specify, is there in any instance, or is it just dependent on, I guess, the infrastructure, if they have their own DNS server, like if they manage it or not?
So you saying quad A, which relates to IPv6, right?
What? No, like the 8.8.8.8, like, like the DNS.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard you. I thought you were okay. I thought you said quad A meaning 4As. All right. So you saying me setting the the interface, right? The DNS server to 8.8.8.8, correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to the lab, right? Okay, so we're here, right? So ask me your question again.
Okay. is this firewall like, okay, basically my question is, when is there a specific time where we set the DNS server as the Google server or specify to a private DNS server? Like, basically that's my question. Or is it just dependent on the infrastructure?
No, that's a good question. That's a good question. So
May I jump
we
in?
have, say it again.
May I jump in?
Sure.
It depends on the infrastructure. If you're running like Active Directory internally, you want to use Active Directory servers. Because
Okay.
if you don't use Active Directory servers, you use like Google's, and Google says like, hey, where's work.local? And
Oh,
Google says there's no such thing.
okay.
You can have like registry issues and whatnot with some of your workstations because now they know there is no such thing as this. And it
Okay.
might get stuck in the registry. 8.8.8 is my main DNS.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay. All
All right.
right.
Now, if it's just you at home and you don't have a DNS server,
Right.
8.8.8 is perfect.
Okay. Okay.
So it just depends on your internal network, what you want to send out.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to jump in. Carry on.
No, you're good. You're good. So Christian, it's good that you jumped in, but and again, it was a great breakdown. But I want you guys to remember the key function of DHCP, right? It is not a DNS server. It is just telling the clients certain values, right? Me specifying what the DNS server is, I'm just setting that number. I don't care where it's located. That's for layer 3 to figure out. Okay? I'm just setting that value. Whenever the door process happens, it's going to capture that value. The IP address is going to capture that value. The net mask is going to capture that value. The default gateway, it's going to capture that value. So it all depends on how you want to configure it. Okay? Not so much the location, but how you want to configure it. Because again, remember the golden rule. It's not so much, a vendor will tell you, or recommend or build your network for you. You can pay for those services, but it's about how you want to build it, right? Every device is going to let you do anything you want, right? So I can set it to right, and that'll work. That'll absolutely work, right? However I want to do it. I can go ahead and set it, right? I don't have to use the function that's the same as interface IP. I can just set it here, right? So it's based on whatever value you want to set. Don't get stuck. I don't want you guys to get stuck on which one we're going to use, et cetera, et cetera. The DHCP role is just handing out that information to clients that require it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That totally makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Okay. Right. Let's keep going. All right. Okay. So you have different options, of course, for using that DNS server option, right? You can go ahead and set up that DNS database, right? You can add DNS zones, right? If you've ever played with, Windows Server, of course, you know that it's set up in different zones. You can set that up, right? You can add DNS entries to each zone, right? To go ahead and maybe if you set it up as a forwarder, you can go ahead and set that there, right? You can set up the host name. You have plenty of options, right? It is encompassed full DHCP options, right? That's set on there, right? Has that role, same as DNS. It is giving you the entire DNS function, absolutely everything that you see on Windows Server outside of probably one or two functions. It is on the Fortigate. Okay. And that is our built-in server section. Okay. As you know, when we get to the end of it, we have two questions. So I'm going to go ahead and read off the question, and I'm going to read off the answers. and you go ahead and tell me which one is the right one, which one, and explain why. Okay. So, question 1. When configuring a FortiGate has a DHCP server to restrict access by a MAC address, what does the assign IP option do? Does it A, assign a specific IP address to a MAC address, or does it B, dynamically assigns an IP address to a MAC address? It's kind of tricky.
Is it B, dynamically assigned?
Why?
Because it's DHCP. What do you mean? Like, you mean like when the question was when you enable the DHCP server in the
To
firewall?
restrict that. To restrict access by MAC address.
Oh, to
What?
restrict access.
By MAC address, what does the assign IP option do?
Oh. And the answers were restrict by MAC or by IP?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read off the answers for you. So it's either A, assign the specific IP address to a MAC address, or B, dynamically assigns an IP address to a MAC address.
It's A, because it's restricting it by the MAC.
By the MAC address?
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
What do you mean why? Because it's configured to statically assign based on the MAC.
Okay. All right. Let's take a step back.
Oh Lord, I got it wrong.
It's restricting.
Okay.
All right. Let's read that. Let's go over this, right? So within the DHCP server, right, the IP address assignment rule, right, it has the option to either assign, block, or reserve the IP address to a host, right? To assign, type the MAC address, right, and select the action type assign IP, or choose from an existing DHCP lease. To block, type the MAC address and select an action to block. I'm going to read that again. To assign, type the MAC address and select the action type assign IP, or choose from an existing DHCP lease. Okay. To block, type the MAC address and select an action type to block. Okay. Now, I'm going to read the question again. When configuring a FortiGate has a DHCP server, to restrict access by MAC address, what does the assign IP option do? Does it A, assigns a IP address to a MAC address, or does it B, dynamically assigns an IP address to a MAC address? Think about this now.
It dynamically assigns then.
There we go.
So I was right the first time. I knew it. I don't know.
Right? So this is what the exam is going to do, right? It's going to, listen, I told you it's going to be riddles. Okay? All right. Next question. Good job, by the way. Question 2. When configuring, right, the FortiGate has a DNS server, which resolution method uses the Fortigate DNS database to try to resolve queries? Is it A, non-recursive, or is it B, recursive?
I'm going to say it's non-recursive.
Okay, why?
Because it's not actually the DNS server to actually give out the answer. It's just going to like forward the information over.
When configuring the FortiGate has a DNS server, which resolution method uses the Fortigate DNS database to try to resolve queries? Is it A, non-recursive? Is it B, recursive? And explain why. Christian, I'm staying with you.
Nobody else is here. I still want to say non-recursive because it is not.
By the way, you were right.
Yeah,
I need you
it's
to explain the reason correctly.
yeah. It is not the, what is that? SOA. It's not the start of authority. So it's going to be non.
Keep it simple, right? So answer the question with what's in the question. Okay.
Okay.
So when configuring, FortiGate has a DNS server, which resolution method uses the FortiGate DNS database to try to resolve queries. The non-recursive method uses the FortiGate DNS database only to try to resolve queries. See my screen? What you explained first was recursive.
Okay.
Right? So you're right on the first part where it says it's going to go ahead and try to resolve it, but then you said it's going to go ahead and forward that request if it can't. Okay? Non-recursive is just going to go ahead and try to resolve it. That's it. It's not going to forward it. Answer was right. Explanation, it was off.
Okay.
So, and again, these questions are going to continue to be harder, and it's meant to do that because on the exam, you're going to be by yourself, right? So you need to be able to break this down, okay, within your head, okay?
Okay.
All right. But guys, good job tonight, okay? Let's go ahead and keep going. And let's see if we have time. We actually do not. So we are going to end it here, okay? And you guys will be done for today. And we will come back on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we are actually going to finish off in the fundamental maintenance section. And we're actually going to be on a real FortiGate this time, okay?
Okay.
Great job.
Each session's going to be an hour.
Say it
Tuesday,
again.
Wednesday. Each session is going to be an hour. Tuesday,
Hold on,
Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Give me 1 second. Let me pause the recording.
Okay.